Hello, BookTube. The guys over at Strip Cover Lit continued their read along of The Fellowship of the Ring with their latest video, in which there was quite a bit of bizarre stuff. There's no other real way to put it. Uh, we're reading the last 6 chapters of Book 1 of The Lord of the Rings. So everything from In the House of Tom Bombadil to The Flight at the Ford, which ends Book 1. And in that stretch, they talked about uh, a character named Bombadillo, who is apparently the god of mushrooms. Never encountered this character nor any kind of association like that in this book, so that was fascinating. And among the other things they mentioned, Dalton Gentry confronted Adrian Fort on something he said in the previous read along. In the previous read along, Adrian said that the one ring to rule them all is a vagina. It's a metaphor for a vagina, because only men have it, and only men want it, and men covet it and keep it from other men, I guess. We'll get to Galadriel later on. But Dalton confronted him over the fact that some of their viewers had had trouble with that reading. And of course, because this is the age we live in, Adrian doubled down and said, and I quote, "It's in the text. And no matter what the rest of you think about all the great and fantastic stuff that they said about the Fellowship of the Ring in this latest installment of theirs, I wanted to make sure to tell you that is not in the text." In order for something to be in the text, it has to be in the text. In the printed words on the page, just nothing like that at all. Nothing like even remotely close to that would have crossed Tolkien's mind, much less made him type it onto paper. But before we start talking about interpretations, I thought we'd go over once again plot, what actually happens. Now, we left the last installment with Frodo Baggins and his 3 friends, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, all fellow hobbits, short, human-like creatures from a bucolic land called the Shire in Middle-earth. They have decided that because a magic ring has fallen into Frodo's possession that clearly is more dangerous than they thought, they've decided to leave the Shire and make their way along roads to Rivendell, the nearest stronghold of the High Elves, these mystical beings that they assume will be better equipped to help them with the ring. And in the course of the first 6 chapters of Book 1, we see their adventures, which culminate with their being attacked by ancient trees in an ancient part of an old forest and saved by a mysterious character named Tom Bombadil. And our 6 chapters today open with the chapter called In the House of Tom Bombadil, where the hobbits are rested, they sleep, they eat, and they partake of a wholesomeness in Tom Bombadil's house that increasingly seems unnatural. Wonderful, but not natural. It seems like the house is taken out of time. It's a wonderful chapter, wonderful pastoral prose poetry that Tolkien just infuses throughout the whole thing. Very different prose register than anything we've seen so far. When Frodo wakes up and looks out his window at the House of Tom Bombadil, we're told in the east, it was a pale morning. In the east, behind long clouds like lines of soiled wool stained red at the edges, lay glimmering deeps of yellow. The sky spoke of rain to come, but the light was broadening quickly, and the red flowers on the beans began to glow against the wet green leaves. The hobbits feast and sleep in the House of Tom Bombadil, and they listen to him. He tells them stories, and eventually they leave. He gives them his blessing to go on the road again, and they do, and they very shortly encounter a barrow. These things are virtually unknown to American readers, but they dot the English countryside. Gigantic mound, a burial mound, and inside they encounter wights. They encounter, animated corpses that want to kill them and make them corpses. And at the very last minute, they are saved once again by Tom Bombadil, who destroys the Barrow-wights, and hauls the hobbits outside into the healing sunlight, and with them hauls out a big armful of the wights' buried treasure, jewels and ceremonial daggers and whatnot, and hands them all out to the hobbits, which has become very important later on in the book. The hobbits now have ancient weapons formed in an earlier age by a mighty race of man. They don't have just ordinary, apple knives that they might have in the Shire. They didn't even think to leave armed. Now they have weapons. They feel a little foolish carrying them, but they aren't just ordinary weapons. And they very much they're making for Bree, the village of Bree, is their next major stop, and they very much want Tom Bombadil to come along, but he tells them he's not leaving his own land. He'll go to its border, but no further. So he takes them that far, and then they end up in Bree, which is a human settlement that's nevertheless very accustomed to other races. Dwarves come through trading, hobbits come to stay. They have the Inn of the Prancing Pony has rooms specifically made for hobbits on the ground floor with round windows. And there they're welcomed by the innkeeper, Barleyman, and there they meet a stranger called Strider, who's tall and lean and looks dangerous. And while they're staying at the inn, the Black Riders, who have dogged them on the road, appear again, and they are in Bree, and they attack the inn at night, and it becomes clear to Strider, and he makes it clear to them, that they have to just go. They have to. They had originally planned to sort of slip away without any notice, but they can't do that now. They just have to make for Rivendell as best they can. And the hobbits are suspicious of Strider at first, until a letter, Barleyman remembers that he has a letter from Gandalf saying to trust someone named Strider. And they're still suspicious. Sam, in particular, thinks maybe this is not Strider. Maybe you killed Strider and took his clothes. How do you even know to trust you? And Frodo has a wonderful line where he says, "You are speaking to Strider." He says, "You have frightened me several times tonight, but never in the way that the servants of the enemy would, or so I imagine. I think one of his spies would, well, seem fairer and feel fouler." And so in Strider's company, they head out for Rivendell, but it's a neck and neck thing. It turns out that the Black Riders are right behind them, and also some right ahead of them. There's a great ford to cross into the territory of Rivendell, and the ford is clearly guarded. And during an attack by these Black Riders, Frodo is injured. He puts on the ring to try to vanish from their sight, and it turns out they can sense him just fine. And one of them knifes him in the shoulder, and the blade is clearly sorcerous, and the wound is draining his strength as they go along. He manages to continue going along, but he's fading with every minute. Just before they reach the ford, they are met by a high elf named Glorfindel, who was sent out from Rivendell to find them. As he puts it, Elrond, the leader of the elves at Rivendell, sent riders east, west, north, and south in an attempt to find these wanderers in the wilderness. Glorfindel says that there are few, even in Rivendell, who can ride openly against the Nine, and he is one of them. And he's almost no sooner met them than the trap closes, and then the riders attack. Glorfindel says, "Fly, make for the ford, the enemy is upon us." And so Frodo does. He rides on Glorfindel's horse straight at the river and straight towards the ford to get across into safety, and almost makes it. There's a great scene where he is on the opposite shore. The riders are in the river. They stand on their stirrups, and they freeze him. They're claiming him even at a distance. They're far more formidable than we originally thought. And the only thing that saves Frodo is that the river itself suddenly seems to rebel and come in flood tide to wipe the horses away and the riders with them. That's how the Flight at the Ford ends, and that's where our segment ends here. And the main thing that I wanted to point out to you in these 6 chapters is what you could call a theme. The theme of the original 6 chapters that we read was that the hobbits are gradually emerging into a broader world. The little land of the Shire where they live suddenly starts to seem provincial to them as they see a little bit more of the world. And in these 6 chapters, the theme, if you want to call it that, is the revelation that things aren't what they seem in that outside world. We get it over and over again. The Strider seems at first like a seedy, fairly dangerous wayfarer in an inn, but as he tells them long stories about the mythic history of Middle-earth, and as he guards them to the extent that he's able in the wilderness, it becomes obvious to them over time that there's much more to him than meets the eye. In fact, there's a famous poem, "Not all that glisters is gold, not all who wander are lost," a poem that's about Strider, about Aragorn. He tells them, my name's not Strider, it's a nickname that these people give me. And he also tells them that the folk of the Shire know very little of the full greatness of Gandalf either. He tells them, you mostly know him by his toys and games, but there's far more to him than that. In fact, when they're wondering why Gandalf was late, why he didn't meet them on the road, the hobbits wonder if maybe the Black Riders impeded him. And Strider tells them, well, maybe, I don't know of anything else that could except maybe the enemy himself. That's fairly amazing. That's not the conjurer of, birthday party treats that we've seen before. That's a much deeper character. And the ring is revealed as much more than it is. We knew it previously as a thing where when you put it on, it makes you invisible. But it turns out that's a naive reading of what actually happens. You shift into the land of shadow, where the riders are actually living all the time. They don't, as Aragorn says, they don't live in the sunlight. They visit it. They actually live in the land of shadow. You are not visible anymore to the people who live in the normal waking world, but you're easily visible to them. You are entering their world. So the ring is revealed as a little bit more complicated than simply making you invisible. And the biggest revelation of all in these 6 chapters, the thing that all Tolkien fans love and think about and talk about all the time endlessly, is Tom Bombadil, who, when we first meet him, is a happy singer of mystical songs that can, have magical effects. He seems like just another mythical character, like the elves that the hobbits met on the road, or the trolls that Bilbo meets in The Hobbit. But when we're meeting, when the hobbits are resting and talking with him in the house of Tom Bombadil, it becomes clear that there's much more to him than that. He remembers everything. He is the oldest thing alive on Middle-earth. He remembers when the first acorn fell. He remembers when the seas weren't bent. He remembers when the elves came over. He remembers when Sauron the Dark Lord came over. He remembers a world before all that. And when, at one point during his talk, Frodo mischievously puts on the ring, Tom Bombadil can still see him. And when Tom Bombadil takes the ring, it's a trinket to him. He can spin it around. He can make it disappear. It has no effect on him whatsoever. Which is, even or this early in the book, we know to prick up our ears when we see something like that. That's not true for anyone else. That's not even true for Gandalf. And that works really well. The first 6 chapters, that idea of an expanding awareness of the world very slowly, leaving your provincial home and seeing the larger world, that was great as a way to start, because your reader is also experiencing this hugely complex world for the first time. And the theme in these 6 chapters, that not only are you encountering things in a larger world, but very few of those things are what they seem. They all have deeper and sometimes darker portents to them. That's also wonderful. It throws the reader off their guard. So it's not just that you've left the Shire, it's that you've left certainty behind. You don't know what anything that you're encountering might actually be. And you're thrown back on your instincts. the hobbits never doubt for a minute that Tom Bombadil is their friend. And what Frodo says about Strider, that you know, I have to go with my instincts here. It seems to me that if you were a servant of the enemy, I would know it. That's really good. That's very good on Tolkien. That's very wise on Tolkien's part. Not only to offset all of our expectations, but also to quietly reassure us that we still know what's what. we can still sympathize with the hobbits. They're not just country bumpkin fools. We can still follow them through this adventure. That becomes incredibly important in the next 6 chapters that we read, because the next 6 chapters are the proper start of the story, when this stops being any kind of cousin to the Hobbit and rightfully plants both feet in being an epic fantasy. That happens next with the chapter Many Meetings, and culminates in the chapter after that, the Council of Elrond. And we'll be talking about that next time. I'm sure the guys will be too. I can't wait to see what the Council of Elrond symbolizes. So that is the Fellowship of the Readalong Part 2. Now we are done with Book 1 of the Fellowship of the Ring. We're about to go to Book 2. And the reason that Tolkien separated these two, Book 1 and Book 2, is because, as you know, he knew perfectly well, the tenor of his story is about to change. So we'll get to that next time with Many Meetings. And as usual, in the comments field, let me know if you're reading along, especially if you're reading along with the guys. Leave a comment for them, and leave a comment for me what you're thinking of all this. And I'll see you next time, BookTube. Sorry for the length of the video, but as I said before, if anything will do it, it's talking about one of my favorite books. So I'll see you next time. Thank you.